How can Philadelphia Eagles general manager Howie Roseman stay ahead of the curve this year during the 2024 NFL Draft? It's an outlier version of Mock Draft Monday.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Eagles fans, I'm Louis DiBiase, co-host of the Locked On Eagles podcast, Eagles analyst, also over at Bleacher Report. He's Gino Camilleri, our scouting director, my co-host, and also an Eagles analyst, also over at Bleacher Report. On today's edition of Locked On Eagles, it's not really Mock Draft Monday, it's Mock Draft Tuesday, as we go over a 7-round Philadelphia Eagles mock. And we're going to really focus on outlier prospects today, how Howie Roseman can zig when the rest of the NFL zags. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 back if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. And yeah, Gino, so, as we do our mock drafts, again, we like to be predictive at times, see what Howie Roseman likely will do to give our listeners the best idea of what's to come. We like to do what we would want as well, but we like to do different themes each time just to shake it up because the draft is very unpredictable, and every single year, especially with the Eagles, it does feel like the strategy changes. So today, I think we're going to really focus on outlier prospects, how Howie Roseman can stay ahead of the curve by maybe focusing on some players that might not have certain traits the league likes, but might have elite traits in other areas that can help this football team.
So the thing with outliers is you want to be on the forefront end of things. You don't want to go and take athletes that are on the lower end. And it kind of sucks that Bucky Irving goes out there for my Oregon Ducks, lays a stinker. He had, I think, a 2.78 relative athletic score. That's not the outlier that you want to go for. You want to go for the Xavier Worthy outliers, the guys that break records. And the thing about Xavier Worthy, that type of outlier, the production matches what he put out this past weekend. When he was a freshman at Texas, his production was off the charts, and he just absolutely dominated that wide receiver room with some impressive guys. And you talk about his compatriot on the other side, he outperformed him. I mean, and he's Deshaun Jackson size. Those are the type of outliers you want to go for, the guys that are crazy athletes that you can see are trending towards the way that the NFL is trending, right?
Yeah.
Wide receiver position, a lot of guys are getting smaller. It's, can you run away? Can you separate? Can you get that last separation element at the top of your route, where the Eagles have kind of lacked down the field in the last couple seasons?
A lot of edge rushers are getting smaller too, Gino. Yep. And Howie Roseman himself, he was talking a lot about this exact conversation at the Combine, saying the Seahawks, back in the day and still now, teams want faster cornerbacks, and there was a lot of lengthy players falling at the end of the draft, and Seattle was jumping on those kind of guys like, a Richard Sherman, and even a few years ago, Tariq Woolen as early as or as late as the 2022 draft. So yeah, it's ahead of staying, it's staying ahead of the curve. But I will say there's reasons certain positions have, everybody goes for certain traits, right? I mean, there's a reason you want length on the edge. There's a reason you want 4.3, at least 4.4 speed at cornerback. But sometimes you miss out on elite talents like Devontae Smith if you're nervous about his weight. Or sometimes you might not go for a player like even though right now it hasn't worked all that well, a Jordan Davis type of player, because there's certain attributes you're looking for, and he might not fit that prototypical, traditional box. But sometimes if players have other elite traits that can change the position, you want to change the game and stay ahead of the curve.
And we've, I would say, on our show, been okay with the idea of adding guys that fall under that moniker. And I point to one, Charles O'Menahue, a couple years ago, where the reason that people were hard on him, like, oh, where's he gonna play? He's a tweener. Right. It's like, it doesn't matter where the freaking guy plays. He's
people get scared of positionless players, right?
Off the line, and like Kyle Hamilton, where are you going to play him? It doesn't matter. If guys can play football and then they go and test exceptionally well at the Combine, and they put together a good all-star circuit and put together a good interview rotation, they're going to be guys that you can rely on. And the Eagles, they've hit on some, but at the same time, Lou, they've trended in the direction of staying away from those guys that aren't athletic. I said it on the show where I did a solo show last week. Howie Roseman, his average relative athletic score of the guys that he's drafted in the last 4 years, it's 8.4 or more. That is breaking it down to statistics, at least one standard deviation away from average. They want guys that are good to better athletes. And that's the type of outlier you want. You want guys in a sport that you have to be fast, quick, and athletic to be exactly that.
Absolutely. So that's what we're going to do on today's mock draft. And not every pick has to be an outlier, but we want to focus on some players that maybe you're a little bit lower ranked because they don't have the size or the speed, but they have another elite trait that Howie Roseman could really use on offense or defense, and it could maybe change the position. So that's what we're going to do today. And Geno, at pick 22, we did actually trade up. So we wanted to do this before the show and set this up because last week we had a conversation after the cornerbacks worked out on Friday, and we said, the Eagles might have to move up if they want to get a Terrion Arnold or even at this point a Quinyon Mitchell or a Nate Wiggins from Clemson. And I think that's going to be the focus in round one, is really targeting that position by moving up.
Howie Roseman doesn't like to stay put. If you look at the times that he's made his selection at the pick that he came into the day with, it is rare. And like you said, it has never happened. And Howie Roseman is one that, well, actually, no. Last year, he did trade up last year. I always mistake
for Jalen Carter. The only times he stayed put, I remember, were Malcolm Smith Marcus Smith and Jalen Reagor. I think are the only two that off the top of my head.
And look how that turned out. If Howie sees a player that he likes, and it's going to cost him the 75th pick or beyond, he's going to go and do that, man. He's going to go and get his guy. And I think he would have been willing to pay more than what Chicago took for Jalen Carter last year. They only took a 4. I think he would have been willing to give up a 3rd-round pick. And I think you're right in that area. If you talk about those guys, those outliers, the true blue chip prospects that you wanted to bring into your team to be a foundational element, don't let the board come to you. You go and attack it. I think it's a smart move. It's one situation that we do every mock draft offseason, and this is the time. And I think it's a good way to kind of compound on the combine and how teams are really, they're feeling that anxiety now of, everybody knows everybody's secrets. Everybody knows who everybody kind of wants. There's no secret. If Howie wants to go get his guy, the league is going to know. He's going to call everybody, and he's going to have every situation set up. And that's what we wanted to do today.
And for me this year, I mean, he's been aggressive, as you mentioned, trading up for wide receivers, for pass rushers, for offensive linemen, right? He traded up for Andre Dillard in 2019. He's pretty much traded up for every position you can think of, quarterback as well. One thing he has not done is traded up for a corner. And on Friday, these guys tested through the charts. And there is a player that, again, Terrion Arnold, you might have to trade up into the top 10, top 15 to get him. That might be a pipe dream. Quinyon Mitchell's a guy that I think they would love to trade up for. But when we're sticking with the outlier theme, let's talk about Nate Wiggins. We traded up from pick 22 to 20 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Nate Wiggins, a cornerback from Clemson, Geno talked about how the Eagles want to draft elite athletes. This is an elite athlete, 4.29 speed at the combine, can run with the best of them in the NFL. And there are some world-class athletes at receiver right now in the NFL. And look how deep the receiver class is this year. You need guys that can run. You can't afford to put out a James Bradbury anymore. I know he's around Emmanuel Forbes type of weight. He's 170, 173 pounds. Didn't even make it through the combine healthy. That's the risk you take, though, when you go for an outlier that has these certain elite traits, but he lacks in the other ones. If he was a certain position, Geno, that might be a concern. At corner, though, I might be a little more willing to take a risk on a smaller guy when he has 4.29 speed. Yes, not a great tackler, setting the edge at corner might be an issue, but again, I think I'm willing to take that risk for the elite coverage traits.
The thing about him is, like you said, it falls into the Emmanuel Forbes territory of you are taking him to be able to defend that long speed element. He is going to be subject to being picked on the outside.
He's got to stay healthy, too. It's a big if.
One thing I want to point to with that, the Eagles were okay with taking Keely Ringo last year, where they didn't really focus on a guy who, hey, it might not be his best asset, but he has other things that we like, right? They like the size, they like the length, they like the agility in Keely to be both a safety and a corner if he could continue to improve his hips, which, look, they put him out there, and he looked a lot better than I thought most of us thought he was going to, right? And Nate Wiggins, he might get picked on the outside a little bit when it comes to tackling, but I bet you what, Lou, they're not going to have guys running by them like Bradley Fletcher had in 2014 and years like that. That's the way that the league is going, and smaller wide receivers, smaller cornerbacks. It's the way that the league is trending, Lou. It's a smaller league to get faster. That's truly what it is.
And again, you don't have to do what you did in 2020 where you take all of these receivers that only run a 4-3 and that's all they do. I'm not saying suddenly build your entire secondary with guys built like Nate Wiggins. You can go get bigger safeties, bigger linebackers. You have a huge defensive line. I think it's okay to have one undersized player on this defense. Again, if he has that world-class coverage ability and he can run a sub 4-3.
The thing I worry about, though, with that is how is he going to translate to a Fangio-style defense where could he be the number one where they're going to have to be very physical up at the line of scrimmage, play that press corner, and be able to tackle? We'll see. In year one, I think it's a very good situation for him to come in and be opposite of Darius Slay. I think it's a very advantageous position for him to come in and sit there and also compete against those young guys. And at the same time, Lou, it fits what Howie Roseman wants to do. He wants to be at the forefront at a position where, hey, Rasul Douglas, what'd he run when they took him? Like a 4.68 at the time? It's completely different than it was even 6 years ago.
I agree. And I get the Fangio point's a good one, but I don't want to put the draft in a box now where I'm, it makes sense. Obviously, he has to fit the scheme, but to me, like, I want to take the best talent and mold my scheme around the
and
talent.
Howie will never do that.
Yeah, right. And if Fangio is going to be a Jim Schwartz type of guy where he's saying, I'm not going to make a Rasul Douglas work, then you're going to miss out on a lot of talents like Nate Wiggins. Yep. And so, but you make a good point for sure. We took Nate Wiggins at 20th overall. We're back on the clock at 50 in round 2. We'll get into that as we continue Mock Draft Tuesday right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing that we had more time. The question is, time for what? Maybe it's more mock drafts. If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and to make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what that is, what matters to you, so you can do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to whatever your schedule is, whether it's the 8 to 5, 9 to 5, it's the graveyard shift. BetterHelp is here for you. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and if it's not the right fit, you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make more time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. You're going to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/lockedon for 10% off your first month of online therapy. We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, want to let you know Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. We're going to run through another 7-round mock draft. We traded up in round 1 from pick 22 to 20 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Had to give up that 97th overall pick in round 3 to select one of the top 3 corners, I think, in the draft in Clemson's Nate Wiggins. And, today we're trying to focus for the majority of this draft on outliers, how we can, stay ahead of the curve in the NFL, as Howie Roseman loves to talk about every year around this time. So we took Wiggins, and we are back on the clock here at 50 in round 2. You have this pick. Where's your head thinking after we took a corner?
I think this edge group is really unique, and I think where the Eagles are, it's a cool situation for them that they could take somebody who's more of an off-ball backer, like the Edgerrin Cooper that we had taken in the past. Yeah. Or you could take somebody who is really a tweener type of player that plays both inside and out. And that's where I'm going to go. And this is going to feel a little bit homery, but I'm going to go with Brandon Dorlus. I'm going to go right down the Charles Omenihu route, Lou. I think the idea of adding a 3-tech, 5-tech with Brandon Graham's future unknown, with Hassan Reddick's future unknown, Brandon Dorlus tested it way better than I thought he was going to test. He could come in right away, be a situational pass rusher for you, continue to develop against the run where he puts together better run down reps than most people think. He's right in that range, Lou, where if you're talking about an outlier that's not a true stand-up edge rusher, not a true off-ball linebacker, not a true defensive tackle, this is it. This is our experiment come to life with these first 2 picks. I don't know how it worked out this well. I wish we would have planned it this way. But
yeah, I was going to say
Nate Wiggins, who's an undersized corner who can run exceptionally well, and Dorlus, who positionless player. That's what we are trying to get at the forefront of. The guys that have question marks that other teams have, you already have answers to that, and you know exactly what you're going to do with them. And I think
a great point.
With the front that they want to run under Fangio, where it's going to be more 2-down linemen, you're going to have somebody who might be a little bit more athletic to where they can get after the quarterback, because they might be one of the only 2 guys rushing the passer and at the same time be able to take on doubles. Let's go with Brandon Dorless. Let's go with the Ducks.
I love it. And I'm going to, we don't try not to repeat a lot of players in our mock drafts. Although the one year we took like Alton Robinson, I think 100 times, the edge rusher from Syracuse. But I think for this theme of a mock draft, we're going with outliers. You mentioned him already. Edgerrin Cooper just makes so much sense from Texas A&M. This is a stand-up linebacker, but like you said, he can play on the edge. He's such a good pass rusher. One of the best linebackers in this class when it comes to spying mobile quarterbacks. And me and you have fallen in love with these kind of prospects before, right? Like, Isaiah Simmons back in like pretty much every linebacker the Cardinals took. Zaven Collins, that tweener, unicorn-like athlete that, even Jeremy Chin was a safety that you're like, what position is he going to play naturally in the NFL? And I think you're right. You mentioned this in segment 1. Teams sometimes get scared off with a positionless player, but in the NFL now, with so many versatile weapons on offense, you need those kind of guys on defense as well, and the Eagles lack that, I think, right now. So Edgerrin Cooper just makes too much sense for this mock.
I like it. I think you could have made an argument for Peyton Wilson, who ran really good.
Sure,
really well. 233 pounds at that linebacker position, starting to go to the smaller linebackers. And Edgerrin Cooper, that's exactly it. Like, what is he? Is he going to be somebody who might take middle linebacker reps for you at times, or will linebacker reps, or he could really play all over? And you are putting together right now with these picks a positionless group, and it's up to the coaching staff. It's on Howie to get good players. I think we've picked 3 very good players so far. It's on the coaching staff to get the best out of these guys, because like you said, Lou, it can't be Jim Schwartz. Oh, I don't care who you pick. I'm going to play my guys. I'll bring in an old Zach Brown and I'll play him over whoever you want. It can't be that way. You have to get the best out of these guys. And you're talking about guys that tested well. They put together very good tape over the last couple of years. If a coach can't get good play out of that, you might not have the right coach in place.
For sure.
Mock Draft Tuesday is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, Locked On's official sportsbook. And we're only placing wagers there here at LOE because right now, new customers over at FanDuel get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on quick bets, over-unders, same-game parlays. We love the player props here at Locked On Eagles. You can bet on NBA, NHL, anything you can imagine. It is on there. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and shoot your shot. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of LOE, the Locked On Podcast Network, and the NBA. And now, back to Mock Draft Tuesday.
And so right now we traded that third to move up from 22 to 20. So we're not going to be on the clock here until round 5. There was a player that just went that I want to talk about, because if we were doing an outlier scenario where you don't trade up, let's say for a Nate Wiggins, let's say he fell or he took a different prospect at 22 that kind of fits that mold. There's a player for 97 in round 3 that I think would make some sense. And we mentioned him briefly last week, but I look at Johnny Wilson from Florida State. If you're trying to, again, zig when it's just such a fun idea. And again, I'm not projecting he's going to be great at the next level. Normally a receiver that big that runs, and in the time he does, normally doesn't translate well. But if you're looking to create a new role, zig when the rest of the league zags, and you want to go with the big people, beat up little people kind of style, what if you just say, let's go grab the 6'7" kid that runs a 4.52. He's a 90th percentile athlete, and let's throw him in the slot with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. Like, talk about outliers. It's bold, but that'd be something somebody in the league is going to try.
You're onto something. I think these teams are falling in love with big people beat up little people, and if you're going to get smaller, somebody's going to get bigger. So maybe that's the Eagles' approach. I mentioned that the other day with the big slot idea. Like, maybe they just continue to get bigger. Maybe they continue to add another guy in 12 personnel, where you can go out there and make the argument that, Emmanuel Forbes, you could keep up with us, but you're not going to take us down in the yards after the catch situations. And maybe that's who they want to be. And we'll see. And it also depends on how the Cowboys continue to shape their defense, which is in for a major overhaul this season. And same with the Giants, man. They're going to be making moves, and you're going to be on the chessboard at the same time as them. Where are you going to go when they zag, to your point?
For sure. All right, Geno, you're on the clock here at 160 in round 5. We have gone cornerback, edge rusher, tweener, inside and outside. Love the Oregon Ducks pick. And then we went linebacker. So very defensive heavy in this one so far.
Let's get the people somebody on offense. I think
for sure.
we can start to look at the idea of potentially adding somebody on the line. Can you potentially add somebody at running back? Can you potentially add somebody that could be a wide receiver that can come in right away and be a threat for you? Go back to the offensive guard position, though, Lou, because there's a guy on that list who is at the front page of the relative athletic scores from the combine, and that is Mason McCormick from South Dakota State. Jim Nagy said today that he was around a bunch of scouts, and he quite literally said that it was the biggest mistake of his that he did not invite Mason McCormick down to the combine. You see somebody on that field, and Jeff Stoutland is looking at them and can see Mason McCormick go out there and put together a 9.97 relative athletic score. Lou, you talk about elite athleticism and somebody that could be Jeff Stoutland's just.
This is such an Eagles pick.
Dude, it's such an Eagles pick. It makes
and it's a Dakota school of of course
South Dakota State guy. Of course, Dallas Goedert would be pounding the table for him. That's what I think their approach is going to be to the offensive line this year, Lou. Like, let's find the projects, because we have taken on bigger projects with Mailata in the past. And in this group, when there are that many good athletes at that position, trust Jeff Stoutland. Because, you can make the argument that you could take Fautanu from Washington or Guyton from Oklahoma, but when are those guys going to play? When Mason McCormick might realistically play, it could be within a couple of years. Maybe Tyler Steen doesn't work out and he ends up being the guy for you. So continue to invest in that position. They always take a guy in every single draft on the line. You could take it to the bank that they're going to do it this year.
I totally agree. And, Tyler Steen is going to be the favorite to be the right guard, but Geno, you want depth, you want some options and competition for him. And I think Mason McCormick, again, when the Eagles take linemen on day 3, most of the time those players can play at the NFL level. So, I think that pick makes so much sense. We're back on the clock here at 170. I want to stay with offense and talk about outliers. Here's a big, powerful running back from Louisville that also clocked in at, a 4.3? 4.3.
Isaac Gurendo, I think you're going with.
Isaac Gurendo from Louisville. And the city of Philadelphia wants a thumper in the backfield. They want a bigger body. This is your typical Wisconsin framed running back who transferred from the Badgers to the Cardinals. Just makes a lot of sense for me. I think it would be a good compliment to Kenneth Gainwell. And let's say you go out and get Geno's boy Antonio Gibson in free agency, and that's your trio in 2024. I think that would make a lot of sense. He is not a great cut on a dime player. It's one cut, get downhill. But when he's in the open field, he is fast, and he showed that at the combine.
And that's the thing you want with Kenneth Gainwell back there, is you want somebody that can do the opposite of him. And Isaac Gurendo, man, this kid was a track freak coming out of high school. We knew for years he was going to test exceptionally well. And let's just go through his measurables, Lou. He measured in at 6 foot flat, 221 pounds. You talk about a Wisconsin Badger profile right there. He vertical jumped 41 and a half inches. Yeah. That's in the 9.
He was a secret, Geno. I felt like not anymore.
No,
he's on people's radars now.
Broad jump, 10 foot 9 inches, 40-yard dash, 4.33 with a 1.51 10-yard split. Dude, you bring that guy in there. You say, get behind my pulling guard. We're going to block the guy at the second level. You might have to make one guy miss, or you might have to put your pads down and get that extra yard. Please go watch Isaac Gurendo tape if you like to see big people get put on their rear ends.
And again, Geno, before the combine, you obviously knew about him, but I think Jawar Jordan from Louisville was a bigger household name for draft fans, and I feel like Gurendo now, with the way he performed at the combine, he'll be on teams' radars. Of course, he already was, but I think fans will start to notice him a little bit more as we get closer to the draft. We're back on the clock here, the last pick in round 5 at 178. Going a little offense. We've taken a guard and a running back. Geno, what are you thinking here?
I think we take a look back at the secondary pool again, because at the same time, you are going to have the potential that you might have to go out there and get somebody else at safety, somebody that I know where you're going with that. He might not be an outlier, but actually, you know what? He might be an outlier. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for the first time because I can, because these players are actually good players. I'm going to take Evan Williams, the safety out of Oregon, and why I say he is an outlier is because if you watch his tape, he looks like somebody that should play 10 yards and in, and that's it. But then you see him play free safety at times, and he is a menace. He came up huge for Oregon in big-time spots last year, wearing a club on his hand a majority of the time. The Eagles need guys in that middle area of the field. Let Sidney Brown play deep. Let Reed play deep. Evan Williams, he could come in, play special teams right away for you. They're going to have to add bodies there somehow, Lou, and if they go and add one in free agency, a high-end one, you're still going to have to go and potentially add one towards the end of this draft or UDFA territory. I think they signed 4 to 5 defensive backs as UDFAs this year. They need going to be, and they hit on them all the time. Look at Josh Jobe last year.
Right, exactly.
Or
no, Evan Williams and
excuse me.
Ricks, yeah, for sure. I think Evan Williams was somebody that was not on my radar, and in the Senior Bowl, he made some plays, had a great interception in the first quarter of the actual game, closed in. I thought he tested really well at the combine. Yeah, not every pick here has to be an outlier, but I think he would fit really well into the depth of that defensive back room. We have one final pick here at 189. People are either going to love this pick or they're going to hate it.
Perfect for what we're doing here.
It's perfect. The dude at the combine threw 75 yards in the air and said boom before he even put it on a dime. He's 6'4", a physical, powerful, all the traits you can think of type of quarterback. He might be the next Cardale Jones or the next Anthony Richardson. Who knows? But I'm going to take Joe Milton from Tennessee to wrap up this mock draft. And, for the Eagles, it makes sense. You could sign a veteran quarterback in free agency like a Tyrod Taylor. You've got Tanner McKee. What harm could come in getting somebody with these kind of traits in the building? Like, yes, his footwork right now stinks. He is not accurate. His processing is suspect. He is a very raw project. But, man, does he have every tool in his body if you can make it work.
And he's the opposite of Tanner McKee. Depends on who they bring into the building. I think bringing in somebody that is a little bit different into that UDFA room that could be a rookie type of quarterback for you. I think it's smart. It would be very good for like a scout team perspective. He would allow you to have somebody on the other side of the ball that could run and be that athletic quarterback that a lot of teams have. And at the same time, you talk about outliers zigging when everybody else wants to zag. I think we talked about the 2 QB offense on this show a couple weeks ago, Lou. We might be onto something there with Joe Milton and Jay.
Little red zone RPO or two guys
never let Joe Milton throw the ball past the line of scrimmage unless
no, probably
it's like
not.
Xavier Worthy, 100 yards downfield. That would be great. That would be pretty cool. We might have to get into that at some point.
I'm just saying,
Joe Milton,
you want to be different.
Trick play. Hey.
That's an idea. They did it once in 2009 with Donovan McNabb and Michael Vick. Where it was against the Giants on Sunday Night Football. They did a double reverse. Vic threw it in the left corner of the end zone to Jason Avant. Avant dropped it. So they've tried it before. It was 15 years ago, but maybe it's time to tap into that again. Let's recap the mock draft real quick before we wrap up. So we traded up from 22 to 20. We took Nate Wiggins, the corner from Clemson. Then Geno took his boy Brandon Dorlus from Oregon, the edge/defensive tackle tweener at 50. Took Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker from Texas A&M at 53. Then on day 3, we took South Dakota State guard Mason McCormick, Louisville running back Isaac Guerrero, safety from Oregon Evan Williams, and then we wrapped up the draft with Tennessee quarterback Joe Milton. Let us know what you thought of our outlier mock draft. Hit us up on Twitter at LockedOnBirds, at GC24_football, and at DiBiase LOE. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. We'll be back tomorrow. As always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.